welcome.
All two of us?
Well, we decided this. We haven't done this in the past. We haven't done one after the session ended, and we thought we would do that. There was a lot of interesting discussion and things we were trying to get done this year with a change in the composition of the legislature, and some people would say more balance, and there was certainly a lot more compromise involved in the process. So I didn't know if a lot of people would want to be here tonight to find out what happened, or maybe it's hot and they're in their houses or in school and whatever. But so here we are.
We should have advertised that it's air conditioned here.
They probably would have known that, but
Yeah.
still, you're right. So, but anyway, we thought we would do this and give people an opportunity to ask questions. And I think we probably should follow the same format we have in the past, and I'll speak to the areas that I'm involved with, or was involved with, and then Edye can, and then take questions and have a conversation about what interests you, or what concerns you, or what a great job you think we did, and stuff like that. So anyway.
She's snickering over there.
Well, we had an interesting end to the session, last week with the special session, and we were just chatting a little bit about that, and I wasn't able to be here. I had plans a long time ago to not be here, so I missed that interesting discussion around education, governance, and finance, and I'm sure we'll talk some more about that.
Sure.
But anyway, my primary committee is appropriations. And we ended up passing out a budget this year of about $9.1 billion. And just for context, I think last year it was 8.8, 8.9. I'd have to look at the numbers. And usually when the legislative process goes along, we get to the end of a session, and that's the last bill that passes. And so everything else gets worked on, and once the budget passes, the session is over. This year, we had a unanimous vote out of our committee. We all agreed to make some compromises around the budget. I thought we came up with a good budget, and but we were ready to go before some of the other stuff was ironed out, particularly the education, governance, and finance piece. So we ended up passing the budget. Governor signed it, and that wasn't the end of the session, because we went another couple of weeks at least beyond that, at the end of May, mostly around the issue of education and what have you. But just a few highlights around the budget, because we've all been very concerned and very aware, I'm sure, of what's happening. You're cupping your ear. Am I not speaking loud enough?
I'll move closer.
I was going to say everyone can come closer.
Here it is.
Is it me or you?
It's me.
Okay, just want to be clear. So, with the federal government and some of the decisions that are being made around funding and things like that, we're very concerned about the impact on our budget, because of that $9.1 billion, over $3 billion is federal funding, which is substantial, and it's over a third of our budget. And so we've been having when we got done with the budget, we started having departments and agencies come back and talk to us about where they thought they were in terms of talking to their counterparts in the federal government about what's happening with certain programs. We had heard some grants go away, some were sort of on the chopping block, and I think there's still a tremendous amount of uncertainty about what's going to happen going forward. And certainly the big elephant in the room is Medicaid, which is about a little over $1 billion, somewhere in that range. So that's also a big chunk of our budget. And so one of the things we did before we finished up the session was to try to figure out how we could set aside some money or make some money available through some of our reserve funds and things like that, and set up mechanisms whereby the administration can make some decisions if there are cuts. If it was in a certain percentage range, then the Joint Fiscal Committee, which is a committee that meets outside of the legislative session and can make money decisions, So if it falls in that range, but if it goes above a certain percent, I think it's like 4%, we decided impact on our federal funding, that the legislature would have to come back and have that conversation and decide what to do. We essentially earmarked about $100 million to set aside to make some adjustments or respond to some of those cuts that may come down, but we're not already anticipating. Of course, $100 million doesn't cover an $800 million or $900 million. So that's a real issue for us. But so another thing we did, and you might be aware of that, as part of the education, governance, and funding conversation discussion, we had set aside $77 million we had in surplus, and we put that in the education fund for this year, which pays down basically property taxes to about an increase of, on average, about 1%. I think that's the decision we made as a committee and as a body. I wasn't necessarily in favor of doing it that way. I would like to have done half of that, or maybe hold half of that, because when we get into next year, I'm not sure we'll have even close to the rosy picture we've had in the last few years in terms of funding. The other thing that's going to happen is twice a year, and this is how we develop our budgets. Twice a year, we have a consensus forecast, economic forecast. The legislature has an economist, and the administration has an economist. The reason it's like consensus, they both have to agree with each other on what the forecast is going forward in terms of revenues and what's happening on the national stage. Whatever that number is how we build our budget. So like, for instance, when we came in January, there was a forecast from last July that said we were going to have this amount of revenue to work with in January with the budget. But in January, they revised that forecast upwards, so we had more money to work with. Now, there's going to be another forecast this July in essentially 3 weeks, which will tell us whether they have to upgrade that forecast or downgrade that forecast. And that certainly can have implications. If you're following the news, national news, we haven't yet seen the impacts of all the things that are flowing around out there, whether that's tariffs, whether it's messing with our neighbors to the north, all those things, workforce, in terms of what Musk and company have been doing out there. We just don't know what all those impacts are. So I suspect our economy has been strong relative to some of economies across the country. We might get an okay forecast, but I'm really worried about the next January forecast, just when we're about ready to work on that new budget and find out that, oh, we have $200 million less than we thought we had to work with. So anyway, sorry to stop it there on that note, but these are our concerns. These are things that we're thinking about in committee. If I may, just one more thing. One of the things we just didn't get to at the end, although it seems like we had time to get to it, but we didn't get to it, was to have a conversation around, well, if we do need to make choices based on federal cuts and things like that, where we would make those choices. And I'll give you a for instance. It's like, we know that arts have been cut, okay? So the arts councils and things like that in Vermont are really trying to make up for those losses. But at the same time, if we were to lose our healthcare centers, were to lose money for that, we had to make a choice between those two. What would that choice be? And so we wanted to make sure we sort of had that conversation so that we knew that when we got to that place, we had a roadmap as opposed to trying to make it up as we go along. We didn't do that, and I think that's unfortunate. But I'm afraid that we may come to those places where we have to, it's not that we don't care about all those things. We may have to make some choices.
Are you concerned about the tourist issue, because the Canadians not coming over? Because that's a lot of rooms and meals taxes and stuff.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about it. I think a lot of us are concerned about it, but right now we're not seeing the impact yet, right? That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So when do we see that impact? There's no way there can't be an impact from that.
Yeah, we saw, sorry, I'm Edye Graning.
And I didn't say who I was. I'm Trevor Squirrel, by the way. But I think most of you know who.
Our committee, just to answer that, and then I'll kind of loop back around. Our committee took commerce and economic development, so tourism is a big part of what we talk about, and we took testimony from a lot of Vermont businesses that are tourist based, and they saw their reservations decrease by 30% after all of the comments about Canada started happening. And so, we have been, the governor's, tourism department, which is mainly one person, has been doing a lot to really reach back out to Canadians. We have other governmental groups that are really, doing a lot to reach out. We have Kingdom Trails. We have, a bunch of associations really reaching out to Canadians to say, we're Vermont. We're still Vermont. We are your partner. We are your neighbors. We have communities that are cross-border, that have been cross-border forever. And, we still want you to come and feel safe with us, and we want to be able to go and feel safe with you. So, while the income directly hasn't been felt yet, the reservation decrease is something that is a big concern. Yes, to everything Trevor said, we have, all kinds of, and just to say, we did budget conservatively this year.
Yeah, we did. We were very aware of that.
Yeah, so that, I think that's, we are doing as much as we can without having enough information to set ourselves up to be able to react. We don't know what that's going to look like, and we know that it's not going to be great. So my committee, Commerce and Economic Development, we had a few big things that we worked on at the end. One of them was around housing and funding for infrastructure for housing programs. And that is something that did get passed at the last minute, and the governor, I think, is going to sign it either later this week or next week down in Fairhaven, I believe. And then we also worked on age-appropriate design code, which is to take harmful products or harmful practices out of social media. And that's consumer protection, and that's going to go into effect January 2027. And that's a really big deal, and it will make a big difference for the kids in our state. So the reason it has a delayed start is to support Vermont businesses, although there aren't any right now that actually fall under that. It is businesses outside of Vermont that are harming our kids and that have like the infinite scroll, or as my kids call it, doom scroll kind of set in, and they ping you all hours of the night to say notification, go look at this, go look at that, and these kids, like, they're not all kids, but they just are so attached to their devices they can't look away. So that goes into effect 2027, in part because there are some lawsuits that are in the works right now, and we will have time to adjust if those lawsuits, depending on how they turn out. But based on all of the indications, we built a bill that will be effective, and we will have a really good stance if we are sued by any of these companies. So those are the things that we worked on. And then the entire legislature was really caught up in education at the end of the session. And that's why we were there so late, and why we didn't really have a veto session. We had an education session for the last day. So, and that bill passed on a voice vote, and there were a lot of Chittenden County representatives that did not support it, and have spoken to it since then. So happy to talk about that if folks want to talk about that. Happy to talk about really anything that folks here want to talk about. I was going to say, somebody's ringing.
Put it on silent, but
It's just,
Yeah.
Thank you both for your time here, appreciate it, but we'd like to hear more about the education bill and the impact it will have here in our home community and our schools. I know there's a lot of pieces yet to be determined, but to what extent can you comment that way?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to default to you since you're the board chair here.
so the theory is that there won't be any quick changes to any schools across the state. The things that go into effect July 1 don't necessarily impact our area significantly. So it would be if you have not ever attended, but you have the option to take your money overseas, just take because it's a very long issue, but so Vermont, if you don't have public schools in your towns, we do, you can get a voucher and take your money to other places, and that includes other countries. And so as of July 1, if you aren't finishing, right, so if you haven't already been spending time there, you can't continue that. So that's a thing. There also does limit a few more of the private schools that are no longer eligible again to accept new students going forward. So if you have a student that's already started in those programs, they can finish and graduate from those programs. So those are some of the things that go into effect immediately. Doesn't impact our district. We have public schools.
So about the private schools, is it the state funding for those students to attend those private schools? Okay.
Yeah, so the state does not send money. And it will, right, for 3 more years, possibly 4, depending on who has already been accepted into these programs, but it will taper down significantly.
If I may, I think one of the issues for a lot of representatives, a lot of lawmakers that may have supported the bill overall going forward was the amount of compromise between the House and the Senate on the number of students, the percentage of Vermont students that would be in tuition into these schools. I think the House version was 51%, and the Senate proposal was 25%, and then it was just Vermonters or some percentage of Vermonters, which would actually make that 25% a lot less. And you probably know this better than I do, but and there was a compromise of 40% or 45%.
40.
But I think some of us didn't want to go there, but probably could have supported the bill even there. But they compromised back down to the 25%. Took out the Vermont piece, but I think it caused a number of us to basically say, we don't support this now, with that provision.
So
So,
approved
anyway, yeah.
independent schools
Yeah.
that currently have 25% or more of students of students from Vermont public schools can continue going forward to take public school students with taxpayer dollars funding those students. So that's a limitation that is new going forward. So, it's, again, doesn't impact our district.
Yeah.
So what does have to happen is the Agency of Education, I believe, has 5 positions they have to hire. It might be 4, but I think it's 5 in order to support any of this transformation going forward. They are under-resourced to do their job today and significantly under-resourced to do any kind of education transformation. And so that's in the bill. And also there's money in the bill to help them to even get consultants more than that. So all of that are things that they have to do to go forward. And then there is a commission to look at what the new district lines should be going forward. And that will be 6 members, 3 from the House and 3 from the Senate, and 5 people who were in the education world and have some kind of experience in education. And so those 9 people, 5, 6, 11 people, math, will put together up to 3 different maps of the state and recommend that to the House and the Senate, who next year will look at those and say yes or no, or some combination of those. And then there is tax reform, so our tax department looking at how to break, so right now we have homestead and non-homestead, and those are the two ways that we pay for taxes. Your homestead is your home plus 2 acres. Everything else is non-homestead. And so the thought is, if we can make the non-homestead into more distinct categories that are more appropriate, so that a vacant lot that should have something else on it does not get the same tax burden that a business that's generating all kinds of other income for the state, they shouldn't be taxed the same necessarily. So they are breaking that into 3 categories from the 2.
I'm not sure.
It's either 3 or 4. It was 4 at one point. I think it ended up as 3. What am I missing?
Second homes, right?
Second homes is one of them.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so to be able to tax second homes separately from that. And that would be a second home that is a 4-season second home, different from a 3-season camp or something like that.
There are some provisions in there, like a statewide calendar and graduation requirements.
Statewide graduation requirements.
You know, and.
Which is something that our school district, that the education community in Chittenden County is very concerned about, because we have really high standards, and it took years to put those standards in place. And the concern is we have an under-resourced agency of education who is also looking at transforming all of how does the state work for education, and they're going to put together a statewide calendar, and they're going to put together statewide graduation requirements. Are they going to bring everybody up? Are they going to take everybody down to the lowest common denominator? What would they choose in between? And so there are a lot of educators who are very concerned about that.
The state's at a lower level. Why couldn't we continue to educate at the higher level?
Yeah, there's no reason not to, but what does it do for, what are you going to get supported for? So if the agency if their job is to ensure that we have the highest quality level of staff and teachers, and that quality level is here, and we're trying to keep people here, so who's going to foot the bill differently, and is that going to be a cost burden that is shifted to the districts that are more affluent? We don't know. So there are a lot of pieces like that the education community has significant concerns.
Yeah, I've heard.
I'm getting in the weeds
yeah.
a lot on this, but.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people, as they characterize this bill that's passed and be signed by the governor, is very intentional, right? In other words, I think there are a lot of mileposts and places to stop and review and opportunities to shift. Is that always a good thing? I think it can be a good thing, as long as it's thoughtful, and as long as we can manage special interests and those kinds of things along the way, which is always a challenge. Yeah. So, but I think in some ways that it being structured that way, given how enormous this transformation is going forward, is probably more positive than a hindrance to the process.
Yeah. So.
Other questions?
There was something that passed or was talked about in the legislature on supporting infrastructures for communities and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of the housing bill. That's the
Yep.
CHIP.
Yep. 120, is it?
Yeah, 127, yeah. Essentially, if you've heard of TIF districts, which is a way to create infrastructure, think about Winooski downtown and tax increment financing. And I am not going to try to explain that process, but it's a way to get access to funds to create infrastructure, with the idea that you develop this infrastructure, which creates development, which creates a bigger tax base.
You borrow against your future growth.
Yeah.
Let's get out of Chittenden County.
So So, but the concept with the CHIP program, which is basically a sort of a miniature version of TIF program, was to allow communities, like Jericho or Underhill and that may not have certain infrastructure in place. And so either municipalities or even a developer can come in and help set these things up. And the idea is to create that infrastructure with the idea of being able to build more housing with that infrastructure in place. So been a lot of conversation about, because it does have impact on education financing and funding, so that's important to understand. And the House and Ways and Means, who is very much involved in this, wanted to sort of cap how much money per year. And again, I'm not going to be able to explain this to you, but a lot of people were opposed to that cap, thinking that we're going to curtail what potentially could be developed. Although I think the folks from Ways and Means make a good case that you probably would never get to that place.
There was a big misunderstanding on
Yeah.
what was being capped,
Yeah.
is what happened.
So no, it technically isn't a cap on there, or it's up around a couple $100 million instead of 40 million or something. But it remains to be seen. There are optimistic folks who think a program like that could generate up to 3,000 units of housing a year.
Let's get them out of Chittenden County.
Get who out of Chittenden County?
Huh?
Get who out of Chittenden County?
Houses.
Slow down some of this development and high prices and stuff that's going on in Chittenden County right now. I mean, the roads are humongous. Granted, business and business, hospital, college, and everything is based in here. But starting about 1:30 in the afternoon, Route 15 is nothing but solid back-to-back cars heading out.
Yeah, I think if we want to meet our climate goals, we have to build where the jobs are. And I think we have to be thinking about that. So how do we build more walkable communities, more bikeable communities where people can walk and bike to work, where we have public transportation to get people to work? So I think it really has to be planned in a smart way. And it's up to towns to work with developers, to work with the regional planning commissions, to figure that out and to really have a good plan going forward. And, there's now 2 new sources of funds for the infrastructure, which is really important, and all kinds of money for affordable housing. And the more housing there is, then the rest of the housing will be more affordable because there won't be such a scarcity. So I think there are pieces that, that do play in, and that you have to think about it as a system and not as of course, the roads are part of the system, right? So how do we, and now we don't have Green Mountain Transit coming out and doing the Route 15 loop. So I think that's something we have to keep an eye on, and we have to figure out how to work with the regional planners to say, okay, so now it's important and we need to get this back, and what's that going to take? So.
I've lived in Chittenden County for, I hate to say it, 82 years. Grew up in South Burlington to start with, in an area that wasn't too developed, but by the time I got into middle school and high school, things were happening in the area where my folks' home was. And now I look at that area, and then I look at Williston. Good Lordy. I don't think there isn't a piece of property that doesn't have something on it that's got plans to put something on it in there. That used to be all farmland, and I'm not saying it needs to be farmland today, but.
Well, and then you have to think about too, should there be farmland there today, right? Should there be natural areas in other places? And don't you want the housing to be more concentrated so that the nature can stay nature, right? So, there are all kinds of pieces to think about in this. So, hopefully it's people smarter than me who are getting together and working on that.
It doesn't seem like it. 2 or 3 businessmen in Chittenden County, and I don't know exactly where they live, but that have got all the land and development going on in that area between Colchester and Williston. Knock on wood, say, don't come this way.
One of them lives in Underhill, so.
If you think it's gonna stop, you're gonna be disappointed.
Well, people have to have a place to live, but, you know.
Other questions?
I read somewhere a while back that the state was only gonna pave 125 miles of road this season. Is that a reflection of federal money or?
I think this.
Yeah, I don't know about the numbers of miles to be paved. Is that a reflection of what we've done the last couple of years, and is it a decrease in that, or is that a decrease over 6 years ago? Because I know over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of federal money that's gone into infrastructure and allowed for a lot of those kinds of projects. So relative, I'm not sure where that number is, right?
But most of our transportation dollars does come from the federal government.
Yeah.
I think it's 4-to-1 or 8-to-1. It's a big difference, how much we get.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of money flowing from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act also. I mean, there's a lot of work going on out there. You go up to the Milton interchange and where it goes out to the islands and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of money being spent right now on transportation. So, but I drive roads, and we could do a lot more paving for sure.
Yes, there are
I don't question that.
unfortunately third world status, I think.
So, but I can't answer your question directly because I don't know what that number is relative to other years.
Speaking of roads type of situations, who is responsible for repair? I'm using the word repair. Where the Jericho Elementary School is, used to have a flashing light that started when school was on in the morning and in the afternoon, and shut down the rest of the time, so it slowed the traffic down around the school. That has not been in operation since about March. Who's responsible for it?
Yeah, that's Route 15, so that is the Agency of Transportation, and I did email them about it last month. So I'll send another email, thank you.
And the other one is right here at Jolly's, or the wintertime, that somebody turned too quick to go up River Road or didn't make the turn and took out the crosswalk signal.
It wasn't the first time that's happened either.
No.
They need to
No.
put big bollards around that.
But again, it's Route 15, so it's,
So it's a state.
yeah.
And I have one big burr up my fanny. The Cirque, or it is the Cirque Highway, well, it's part of it. If you're coming from Essex, which I do a lot of times, I'll jump on that short stretch and go up to Essex Way to go around rather than go around the corner. You get up there and there's a traffic light which is on signals for people that are coming, we'll say the Richmond direction or whatever, coming up that hill. And if they're gonna cross or turn, make a left-hand turn, they get a green light. But invariably, I can drive, get on there and turn, and as soon as I turn, the red light flashes for that area down there, and there isn't a person, there's not a car, or anything else that's called for that signal. Why?
That's Agency of Transportation also. I think it's worth, sending an email to them to ask for, it's outside of our town, but you can reach out. They are responsive. So.
Or you can reach out to the town too and ask them about that.
That's new traffic signal operations. If you have cross sections like that periodically they will automatically stop the traffic in case there was somebody that got hung up on the other side and it didn't work or something. It's ridiculous. You're sitting there, you're sitting there idling.
Well, if you go back 10, 15 years, yeah, none of those lights were just on timers, right? Now at least you have smart intersections for the most part. Some of them are not always that smart, but most of them work a lot better now that they have those sensors.
Yeah, but that one traffic light has been doing that. Actually, when they first set it up, it didn't do that, and somewhere along the line they came in and did some upgrades, I think with the physical lights type of situation and new controller or whatever, and now it's got this thing, and I don't know how often that it stops, because I end up getting caught in it more times than not.
Other questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Ma'am, I couldn't get here at the start, so this may be redundant, but could you clarify for me when the newly structured education overview is going to kick in with the 5 mega districts, or is that still subject to some tweaking in the future sessions?
Yeah, we did have a long conversation about ed stuff, but anyway,
Yeah,
Edye
so-
can speak to that.
So the 5 districts was a construct that the governor put forward that is not in the bill that passed the House and the Senate, and that the governor signed, is gonna sign? I
Going
think
to
probably is
sign,
going to sign. So that, what passed is districts between, that are recommended to be between 4,000 and 8,000 students, and that there's a committee that is put together of 11 members that's going to work in the off session, so from, July until December, to bring up to 3 maps back to the legislature to go forward with those.
So there's still opportunity for people who know what they're doing to fine tune.
There is supposed to be a lot of public input in the process. The members have not yet been identified of who will serve on the committee.
And in your minds, what's the projected increase in education property tax going to be for most communities, Jericho Underhill in particular? It's too soon to say.
Don't have a clue.
Way too soon to say. Yeah.
I mean, this year it's 1% or thereabouts, on average across
Okay.
the state, but we don't know about next year.
Because we bought
Because we
down the-
bought it down by $77 million in surplus money.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions?
Do you guys have any control over the utilities in the state? I've been having an issue with Consolidated Communications. I'm at the end of the line that's been down since June 6th. They were supposed to come out and replace it.
When we're done here, let's sit and
Yeah.
send a note together, and we can have somebody reach out to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Actually, I have a good relationship with
Oh,
the
Trevor.
advocate in the State House that represents Consolidated.
Good.
So
Okay.
you need to tell me about, give me some, or you can send me an email or we can talk later.
Oh, I've got a whole string of messages, let me tell you.
So, generally, they're responsive when we reach out to them,
Yeah.
generally.
We'll see, but at this point, it doesn't matter. I finally went to Comcast.
Oh, that's somewhat of a similar situation. They went down River Road, replacing all the power poles and such. And then a company, I guess, was working for Comcast, came through and was changing areas where the cable was, so they were all on different poles than, or in some cases, different poles. Well, across from my house is a pole, which is the telephone company and Comcast cable. then the line goes over the road to a pole on the corner of my property, which has got the power pole, and it goes in the ground. Well, 16 years ago, I dropped Comcast. It's been a dead cable. Went to, actually it was Infinity, which is actually part of Comcast. And I says, you know, the cable was sitting there. It's not being used. It got damaged when the the new power pole was put in and such like that. And I'm told, oh, we just put cable up. We don't take it down.
Oh, that's not my issue.
Well,
Comcast is a different story.
But it is
Consolidate's a
important
different story.
that if you switched because you weren't getting service, that's important to get documented, and that's where the, you know, the different advocates or different places need to have that information, so.
yeah,
I seem to think it's okay, you can go for a month without internet.
well,
in
to your,
this day and
to,
age.
yeah, to your point, I have 4 poles that come up to my house. And one of them's fiber now. I run fiber up there. But over the years, they've changed, put new stuff on the pole. And I had GMP out one day because I'm burying my power and stuff like that, right? And I said, well, I have a landline, I have fiber. You look up there, there's 5 other lines besides power. So over the years, things have been added but never taken down, right? So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, well, I've still got my with Consolidated, it's actually a DSL line that's like over the road on the old pole. And supposedly Fidium is gonna be coming to Underhill sometime in the future. I won't say near future, I'd say future. And there's only one thing, one pole, and once that line goes to the new pole, and I'm gonna have an old pole just sitting there in the ground. It's gotta get pulled by somebody.
It'll get pulled by GMP because they own the poles. But the telecommunications company have to move their stuff. The power's already been moved to the new poles.
Yeah.
It's all the telecom
Well,
stuff.
actually, when the guys were doing that, I says, well, what happens with these other lines? He says, the last company to take their lines off that old pole, he says they're the ones responsible for pulling it.
I don't think so, but anyway.
I don't know.
I have a question. I'm wondering what you all feel is the most effective way for us to voice our opinion and try to influence what they take up early in the session in January. You know, I feel like there's a lot of time in the summer, and maybe you all do a lot of work with the caucus to figure out what your priorities are and all that, but as a constituent, I don't feel like I have a good insight into that process, and I don't know how to provide my opinion, because since it's a biennium, there's a lot of stuff that's hanging out there, and I have opinions about what I wished I had seen move, or what moved but didn't get out, that I would like to find an effective way to provide that feedback to whoever can do it, you know.
Well, I think there is a difference between the beginning of a biennium and the middle of a biennium, because I don't know how many bills are in the House and the Senate right now, but I would hazard a guess it's in the 800 to 900 range, okay, which is a little less than what it's been in the past. But a lot of them are just going to sit there, okay? A couple things happen, right? The caucus that's sort of in charge, which in this case is the Democrat caucus right now, in both the Senate and the House, even though the margins are not majorities, super majorities, they play a big part in what gets taken up, number one. Leadership decides, with input from us, somewhat what direction we go in. The other part of that equation are the committee chairs. Okay, so if you've got a piece of legislation, either that you would like to see put there, or introduced, or something you'd like to see move, then you need to go to the committee chair. Or if you know someone in that committee that has a relationship with the chair, then I would try to take
Or if
advantage.
you're guessing what the committee, because it may be legislation that's not filed yet, so you're sort of anticipating what committee it's gonna go to, and that is not always
Well,
how
you
it
know, I
works
think,
out.
That's right.
yeah, I think we would have a pretty good sense if you said what the topic was, where it would probably go. That's not 100%, it's not foolproof.
And then-
I've seen stuff go in committees you wouldn't expect them to go to sometimes.
Yeah. And the last piece is, if it's stuck, where did it get stuck? And that, it might stay stuck, and it might not, and it depends, right? So there's so much that is, it depends, that, you know, we can chart a graph, maybe, like grab coffee and figure it out.
I feel like that whole process of prioritization is more of a black box to the public, which is kind of,
So,
I don't know, that bothers me.
yeah, so general prioritization, I think, is really clear, but I think this is where we talk about, like, the education bill, right, that has all of these nuanced pieces in it that are somebody's priority, and they have to fit together. And so that's really the question is, right, we have like the general thought on, you know, we want education reform to happen. And what that means to all of the different people, you know, 181 people, right, the governor too, is very different. And so how does it move forward, and in what piece it moves forward? And so a committee chair has a lot of discretion, which is why sometimes things get stuck. And so that's why I'm saying, like, right now, there's,
Yeah, they can stop things.
yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Well, it helps too if you know how to navigate the legislative website too, which tells you what's coming and what, you know, where it's going, the committees. But you'd have to know what,
But it doesn't tell you anything about why.
no, it doesn't tell you why.
Yeah.
no.
Correct.
But another piece, if I can just add to what we've been chatting with you about, and that's the advocates, the lobbyists. We don't have paid staff. We have attorneys, legislative counsel that support our committees and always support the work of each legislature as need be around bills and stuff like that. We really don't individually have paid staff. So we're a legislature that's probably unique than most, maybe not all, but most, in that we do rely on the lobbyists for information and understanding what the issues are. And the lobbyists that I've dealt with in the State House understand their role and the importance of them being trustworthy and giving you good information. Certainly they have, you know, might try to convince you, but I never felt like I got bad information. And if you can figure out, or even just contact Edye or I, we could probably say, well, here's a good person to talk to about this or to reach out to that has an influence, because they're in the State House every day. And they do have influence.
They do, but I don't, sometimes I get information that this is what we think is going to happen, and then it looks like it's moving that way, and then there's a big change. And, you know, I'm not in the state, I have no idea why. All I know is the lobbyists told me this was gonna happen, this was gonna happen, this was gonna happen, and A and B happened, and C, it was like left field.
Well, they just
That
can't, they
happens.
can't
Right,
control all of
that's
them.
exactly right, I
And that
understand.
happens to all of us.
Yeah.
There are
Happens
pieces
to
where,
us.
to us, right, that we're
That we support
100%
something.
sure this is moving in this direction, and it takes a left turn, and we're just sitting with our jaws on the floor like, I don't know what to do now. So, yeah, if you figure it out, please let me know.
I will do.
This is tangential to the good information source on two fronts. One, a friend of ours that we met on the way here wanted to thank you folks for supporting the low power communications bill. The case in point is funding for the WRUJ radio
Oh, that
In
one, yeah.
Richmond.
in Richmond, yeah. So, in this age of where do you get reliable information anymore? Because I just feel like at the national level, journalists are afraid to say what is really going on for fear of repercussions from the executive side of things. And then on a second side, a second point, is there an advocate in the state of Vermont for chasing down the convoluted story behind aftermarket vehicle exhaust parts? State of California, for example, has a very comprehensive program that requires vehicles to be tested for their decibel level and their pollution control. And if you're out of compliance, you are fined for running a vehicle that is either disturbing the peace or polluting the atmosphere. And I just wonder if there's an
Well, we do have
advocate
emissions
here.
tests, right, as part of our inspection process.
Yeah.
As far as the decibel level I don't know about that.
I mean, is Vermont
And you,
too
maybe you also
small of a
said right to
state
repair
have-
too, right? I mean,
Pardon?
did you say right to repair?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
you-
so this
You're
is-
putting two things together there.
Yeah, this is all commerce and economic development. This is all consumer protection. So this is stuff that we talk about in my committee to an extent, right? Some of the vehicular stuff does go to transportation, but, as Trevor mentioned, right, we have our annual stickers that we have to get where they test emissions and make sure, and so that should be a place where there are limitations put on how much is emitted, right? And if the parts are appropriate. I had a bill this year about rolling coal, so you shouldn't be allowed to do that. And the issue is that our police don't have the equipment to actually test vehicles on the spot. And so that's a difficult enforcement mechanism there. So it has to be as part of the emissions, as part of the annual stickers. Is there a problem with parts coming in that aren't appropriate, right? That aren't okay? Then, and we don't have a bill. That's something we could look at putting into law. The questions are how expensive. Will it make things? Will it make things more expensive? And how big of a problem is it right now? And so I think that's what we would have to weigh as a state to understand, is that something that we do need to put in place or not, because we have, annual emissions tests already. So,
Should have annual noise tests too.
well, that's, again,
There's
so,
this guy every night heading up Pleasant Valley Road.
so
You can
do
hear
our,
for miles.
but do our police have the equipment to test decibels in their vehicles? And what
No.
would that do? And so
But it would be
that's
part
what
of
we,
an annual inspection too, though.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, there's a motorcyclist that,
What?
I don't know when he
Har-
cranks up, but
Harleys.
somewhere about Chamberlain, so I can hear him, and he's coming up through there, and, I mean, he is well over the speed limit, but, this motorcycle, he's got that thing wound up so tight.
There's a few of them, yeah. Other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, and certainly thank you for your support this year. And we are all involved. I don't know what committees you're involved off session, but I've got a couple of committees I do all year round. So we'll be back at it in January. So
Yep.
we might try to have maybe we'll try to have a meeting in December before.
Sure, yeah. And I'll do office hours again. Once a month, I'll be at probably Jericho Ale and Bean in the morning for folks to come and chat. I'll put that on Front Porch Forum whenever I get that organized. So if you have anything that comes up, send an email, pop in for one of those. If you see us at community events, don't hesitate to stop us. We're there because we're enjoying the event and also because we want to hear from you. We can't do our jobs without you sharing your thoughts with us.
Yep.
So,
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.